They need it in Zoom. There you
You're
go.
live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission's monthly meeting that's being held virtually and in person on Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. My name is Natalie Chrisman-Lazar, and I am your chair. It's 5:31, and I call this meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Chair. Natalie Clearsman-Lazar, Chair.
Present.
Vice Chair Anthony Coletta.
Present.
Commission members David Abranovich,
Present.
Commission member Tammy Bossi,
Present.
Commission member Walter Kukulek. And I believe he is on a plane somewhere coming back from Puerto Rico. So Commissioner Ryan Johnson
Present.
and Commissioner Stephen Slosher.
Present.
Great. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connor. The first item that we have on our agenda is public comment. There are no public members here, so I think we can move on to item 1 on our agenda, approval of our regular meeting minutes for July 21st.
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes for the meeting of July 21st.
Commissioner Johnson, second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Can we go ahead and take a roll call vote?
Certainly. Chair Clearsman-Lazar,
Accept.
Vice Chair Tony Coletta,
Approved.
Commission member David Abranovich,
Approved.
Commission member Tammy Bossi,
Approved.
Commission member Walter Kukulek, who is absent, Commission member Ryan Johnson,
Yes.
and Commission member Stephen Slosher.
Approved.
Thank you so much for that. Our second item on the agenda is an update, discussion, and possible commission recommendations to staff and/or city council regarding the urban heat island study, strategies for a cooler Scottsdale. I think Mr. Connor is going to go ahead and give some opening statements, and then we're going to turn it over to our representatives from ASU.
Let's go ahead and can we get the slides up, Sam? We have some technical difficulty. Hold on, we'll see if we can resolve that.
Bronte, the slide is coming up on the wrong monitor and I've lost the controls to correct that.
I'm not sure. We can see it fine on Zoom. How do you mean you've lost the controls to correct that?
We don't see it on our screen.
I would suggest I can run over and take a look for you. Stand by, please.
Perhaps we can go ahead and go on with the introductions and while we sort out the presentation here.
Certainly, the slides are something I need to use. Maybe it makes sense to have, Mrs. Baumgartner give her presentation. Is this fairly brief tonight? Okay.
Slide it over.
There's a 9.
See, it's not.
Where's the presentation?
He's doing it remotely.
Oh. We'll bring it over here.
Tim, she has slides as well.
I
So
have it
Yeah.
right here, ready to go, but he wants to present.
Okay, well, then bring it over here and let him share a screen.
He already did. See, that's it right there.
Okay, so then bring that over.
I tried. See, I got no control.
Yeah, see, now
just a moment.
Now just take the top of it, and drag the whole thing over here.
There you go.
Okay.
Great.
And then, yeah. You should be able to take that participants over the other one and not have it on.
I think we're about ready to start.
Let's make this small. It's okay. It's okay.
Follow host's view.
It's fine. Okay, and then we won't open this up until we're done with the presentation. Just minimize.
I can't.
That's okay.
I think it looks great.
Great. Okay, David, are you there?
This is your screen that's over there. and this
Hi,
is-
Tim, that I am. Thanks for handling the technical matters on your end.
No problem. If you could advance to the next slide, I'll start with the Scottsdale slides to introduce the project. Okay, tonight we're going to receive a presentation from ASU on the Heat Island plan work that's been going on for the past 9 to 10 months, I guess, probably. We're looking for a discussion at the end of the presentation, hopefully question and answers. And then we'll provide next steps on where we're headed with the results of the plan. And then we're also requesting possible direction to staff and ASU and possibly a recommendation to City Council. Next slide, please. Just an introduction. Most of you remember that we had an intergovernmental agreement signed in July of 2020. This is a 3-year agreement with ASU's Robin Mulaney Walton Sustainability Solutions Services. It's 3 one-year scopes of work and up to $100,000 per scope of per year. This was the first year for the contract for this program. We're embarking on a second program, which will be the full sustainability plan. So move on. Next slide, please. Why did we start with an urban heat island study? Some of it was
This is Commissioner Abranovich. I'm not sure if it's just me, lost the audio on the Zoom.
David,
you
this
hear
is Tony, me as well. I've lost it.
okay. I'm sorry. I'll back up. I must have clicked off my microphone. Yeah, okay. Did anybody hear about the part of the Robin Mulaney Walton Sustainability Services Intergovernmental Agreement, or do I need to repeat that?
We heard that.
Okay, very good. The next slide that we're looking at is why should we start a urban heat island study? Start with the urban heat island study. We were provided input from this commission that would be one direction to head. We also have had record elevated temperatures in the summers, and the growth and density areas that we're anticipating for growth are what we think is one target that we should try to do our best to mitigate while we're in the development process. Next slide, please. Okay, the Robin Mulaney Walton Sustainability Solutions Services works somewhat as a consultant for ASU and for the clients that they have. They're able to access all the different universities and professors and students throughout the university. For this project, they cleaned up with the Urban Climate and Research Center, the ASU. And the next slide. And this is all yours, David. I'm turning it over to David Hondula with ASU.
Good evening, commission members, and thank you, Tim. And thanks to other staff colleagues for the invitation to join yet again this evening. We're thrilled to be back with you for what may be one of our final discussions on this topic, although I doubt the final. I'm joined online by Bill Campbell, our project manager. Hi, Bill. And Mary Wright, one of the lead researchers for the project, who's responsible for all of the impressive work you'll see this evening and have been seeing in the report and in previous meetings. Any of the more questionable material is my responsibility. We've really appreciated the partnership on this project. It's given us opportunity to explore new ideas and think about implementation strategies in new ways. We've very much appreciated the feedback from commission members, and we are looking forward to tonight's discussion. I have a gaggle of slides here that is certainly more than we need to spend time with. So my plan is to really sprint through the first 15 or 20 slides. All of the slides are repetitive with what you've seen in the report, but we have them in the deck here just to refresh your memory. Then I'll slow down a little bit when we get to some of the newer content that we haven't had the chance to engage with you on previously. Please feel free to interrupt at any time. I'm happy to have a conversation, and Tim will help facilitate our Q&A once we're done. Tim, is there anything else I should add from a housekeeping perspective before we dive in?
No, I don't believe so. I think
Okay.
that you'll tell them during the presentation, you'll entertain questions. So
Yeah,
we'll ask them to
absolutely.
raise their hand or to speak up at that time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim. I apologize that I'm not able to be with you all in person. I'm on the East Coast this evening, but do look forward to meeting you in person sometime before too long. Just a reminder, our project overview, our goal was to help the city try to prioritize programs and policies related to urban heat and have an educational component to the project. The original scope of work was for the time period September 2020 to June 2021. But because it was we thought collectively that it was so important to collect on the ground measurements about how heat is experienced in the city, we wound up collecting data very late in that project period, April, May, June 2021. Some data, in fact, are still being collected today. So we are continuing some of our analysis into what's and what will be included to what we refer to in the report as volume 2 of the report that finalizes a couple of additional recommendations and presents results from the complete set of results from the more recent data collected during the summer. Just to skip ahead to refresh your memory on the deliverables, there's a technical report in 2 volumes. As I mentioned, I'm aware that you have had access to the first. There's a data package that has all of the detailed information from every portion of the analysis. Everything will be available to staff to do with as they see fit. There's a public-facing story map that I know at least some of you have engaged with thus far, and of course a series of presentations, including our enjoyable time together. We've already received some feedback from some commission members, and we very much appreciate that. One of the pieces of feedback has been about the project geography, what we focused on, what we have not focused on, and we certainly look forward to that conversation here in a few moments. Just as a brief reminder, in case anyone from the public is joining and has not tuned in before, or for commission members who may have forgotten, while some of our analysis is relevant to the entire city, we especially focused on an area that we called Metro Scottsdale. And Metro Scottsdale comprises the colored regions on this map, the green, the red, the blue, and the yellow. Within Metro Scottsdale are situated the 3 growth areas that we received guidance from staff at the very outset of the project as the places to focus most of our effort. And those growth areas are Air Park, Old Town, and South Scottsdale. Some of our analysis is conducted at the census block groups. We'll see a few of those maps in a few minutes. And some other portions of the analysis were conducted for individual parcels. You'll hear some different temperature terms, and you saw them in the report. Air temperature you're most familiar with on the news every night. Surface temperature, if you put your hand on the ground, it feels hot. That's the idea there. Mean radiant temperature is the best variable for giving us a sense of how comfortable people are as they move through the environment. And you'll see how much more variable mean radiant temperature is than air temperature toward the end of the presentation. This is essentially the table of contents from the report, so I'll skip ahead with just the reminder that interruptions are certainly welcome. As a bit of an orientation to the broad scope of work that is possible related to heat, my colleagues and I at ASU have been thinking about the various types of strategies that cities might pursue to become what we've been calling more heat ready. And we've broken those actions into 3 big buckets. One of those big buckets is on the left. We call those mitigation actions, actions that can make the city cooler and more comfortable. And with guidance from staff, those are the types of actions that we've really thought the most about in this project. But as you move forward in thinking about the city's broad portfolio related to heat, we certainly recognize that these other 2 buckets deserve some attention as well. Adaptation actions, which we consider to be those that help people cope with heat, and internal actions, what's happening inside City Hall that can make all of the heat efforts better, more visible, more effective. While our report is not ignorant of these latter 2 buckets, I do think we focused on the first. Just to begin with the end in mind, so where this is all headed, as you've read, there are 3 different broad recommendations that the plan reaches, supported by the data that we collected. 1, increasing tree canopy. 2, reducing the land area of exposed dark surfaces. and 3, providing pedestrian shade amenities. And I don't think these recommendations, I doubt these recommendations come as a surprise to any of you, but we hope what the report and the complementing data sets really enable you and staff and council to do is pursue these recommendations with more information, maybe with more concrete evidence that can help argue for more funding, more policies, different types of public engagement, and so on. The next 10 slides or so are those that you've seen before, so we won't spend very much time on them, but just to remind you of some parts of the report, we have a land cover analysis that looks at how much of the ground in the city is covered by different types of materials. This is 1 meter scale data. Most recent data set available is from 2015. There are new data just becoming available, but it will be, the raw data are just becoming available, but unfortunately it will be multiple years before those data are really ready for this type of analysis. And we found that there's a lot of hot, dark surfaces in the growth areas that we were guided to focus on, especially in South Scottsdale, which absolutely has a unique geography that I know we will talk about. But in the South Scottsdale growth area, as it was defined, nearly 50% of the land area is comprised as asphalt. And we typically look at asphalt as one of our leading suspects in terms of contributors to, quote, the urban heat island. We have a series of maps that are available for your review. The data behind all these maps are available that show this the variability in land cover at the census block group scale. And we think there were some interesting patterns in the city, perhaps not surprise to those of you that are very familiar with the geography of the city, but nonetheless, we hope will be a useful point of deliberation and a prioritization tool for City Council. The land cover analysis was extended to the parcel scale. We looked for individual parcels that had either a large percentage of their area covered by these hard, dark surfaces, or simply represented a large area of hard, dark surfaces. Here's one of those parcels from the growth areas. This is by no means the worst or the largest, just an example. Some of you might recognize this as the General Dynamics property on McDowell Road in South Scottsdale growth area, which itself represents or accounts for nearly 86 areas of building and asphalt land cover types. And you can see on the aerial imagery there from Google Earth, certainly some large continuous expanses of dark area. We don't see this as sort of a finger pointing opportunity or occasion for blame, but maybe an opportunity for partnership. Maybe this could be an interesting invitation for a future conversation with this one particular private landholder. There's land surface temperature analysis included in the report based on data collected in or 2020, depending on which data sets the land surface temperature were paired with. There are high resolution maps available. I'm sure you don't get a sense of the scale, the quality of the resolution that's available here or in the paper report, but there is a digital file that will be available for everyone to engage with. Perhaps not as a surprise, given that their land cover, the growth areas are much hotter than Metro Scottsdale as a whole with respect to land surface temperature. And what I think is particularly interesting about the distribution of land surface temperatures in these growth areas is that Old Town and South Scottsdale, right where those red words are printed on the screen, if you can see where my cursor is hovering, they're really missing those cool pixels. Everywhere else in the city, whether it's Scottsdale as a whole or Metro Scottsdale or Air Park, they have some parcels that have low land surface temperature, some individual pixels, pardon me, that have a lower land surface temperature, but those are notably absent in Old Town and South Scottsdale. So I think as we look 5 years, 10 years ahead, we'd like to add some dots to this figure where that red text is located now. And where can we do so? We provided these hotspot maps that really help identify where we think help identify where it's hot and where it's not so hot right now. The land surface temperature analysis is also conducted at the census block group scale. We extracted the 5 hottest and 5 coolest census block groups in terms of land surface temperature. And you can see that they absolutely spatially cluster. Again, probably not a surprise for those of you who know the geography of the city, but those hot census block groups are certainly clustered in the southern portion of the city. We were particularly concerned, or we at least found it to be an interesting pattern, but I think it's fair to say we're concerned about what's happening in residential parcels in South Scottsdale relative to the rest of the city. On this plot, we're comparing the average land surface temperature and the distribution of land surface temperature between commercial parcels and residential parcels in the 3 growth areas. And on the far left-hand side, you can see that the yellow bar is notably taller than the blue-gray bar. The blue-gray bar is residential parcels in Air Park, this one here, if you can see my cursor. And there's a big gap between residential parcels and commercial parcels in Air Park. That gap really shrinks as we move into Old Town, and then especially as we move into South Scottsdale, where those residential parcels are almost statistically indistinguishable from their commercial counterparts in the same area. Now, for those of you who have that picture in your mind of that very distinctive geography of South Scottsdale and that it hugs the road network, you might be asking, maybe there aren't even any residential parcels there. Those boundaries do in fact include more than 500 residential parcels that really hug that commercial corridor. So there is a sufficient sample size there that's driving this pattern. We picked out some census block groups, as we did for other portions of the analysis, that might be useful to think about points of comparison. For example, here we have 2 census block groups that really contrast in terms of their tree and shrub coverage, triple the tree and shrub coverage in the Arcadia census block group shown on the left compared to the Holiday Park census block group on the right, and certainly related to that difference, approximately a 15 Fahrenheit difference in average land surface temperature in the block group. We did some statistical modeling based on what happens with as we move from census block group to census block group, as we change land cover by 1%. What does that mean for land surface temperature? And you can see the coefficients here, or you might consider this the cooling effect, although remember it's the cooling effect on the ground, not the air. It's based on land surface temperature. And you can mix and match these numbers to come up with some very coarse rules of thumb. For example, if we had a parcel that was natural desert landscape and we wanted to develop it, or we were supportive of development on that parcel, but wanted to do so in a way that kept the land surface temperature the same, our recommendation would be to add 1 unit of trees or shrubs for every 2 units of asphalt and building. You can see that the tree and shrub cooling effect is approximately double the asphalt and building warming effect. So we need 1 unit of trees and shrubs for every 2 units of asphalt and building. We could certainly get into more specifics and individual cases there, but we think that might be a useful rule of thumb to have in mind as we move forward. There, of course, is a lot of attention to issues around equity and justice in our contemporary dialogue, whether it's in climate or many other social fronts. And we thought it was worth including some equity-oriented analysis in this report as well. Here we're comparing per capita income, or we have maps of per capita income and surface temperature in the city. And we found that, as is true in almost every other city where this has been studied across the United States, including in the desert Southwest, hotter census block groups tend to have lower incomes than cooler census block groups. The specific relationship in Scottsdale is that 10,000 degrees in terms of per capita income buys approximately 1 degree Fahrenheit of cooling of the land surface temperature. And then we have some tree data that we've told you about before, derived from LiDAR data. There was a new LiDAR flight flown recently, so these data could be updated. I was giving Mary a hard time that we're going to have to, unfortunately, update these data anyway because of all the trees that got taken down with our terrible recent storms. So there will be new LiDAR data at some point, but this is the best we have for now, about 6 years out of date. There's information about tree density, the actual count of trees in each census block group and on each parcel, and also information about tree height. Let me stop there and catch my breath. I think this is a good time to entertain any clarifying questions on the first half of the presentation before we move on to talk about some of the newer work.
We have one here from Tammy.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask a quick question regarding modeling from granite coverage as well, because we have so much rock granite coverage that would probably have similar heat factors to, not as bad as asphalt, but there may be some, do we have any analysis of that anywhere? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a good question. Mary, what can you tell us about how that material would be classified in these data?
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, from the satellite imagery, essentially we use the reflectivity and the wavelength of the surface as it bounces back to the satellite. And so especially in the valley, soil and concrete, and I would imagine that includes granite as well, all sort of fall within the same wavelength, and it's really hard to distinguish them from one another. So that's why you'll see in some of the other figures how soil and concrete get paired together. And there's just not really any reasonable way to do it using this method to separate them out.
Mary, thanks, Mary. Would it be fair to say that if a map existed of where the surfaces were, we could certainly intersect that map with, with our data and produce some new estimates?
Yeah, absolutely. We could totally do that.
Great. Okay, Tim, how are we doing for time?
I think you're doing fine. Keep going.
Okay, all right, fantastic. We will continue on, and I know we'll have some good time for discussion. So I wanted to share just a little bit of an introduction to some of the newer data and analysis. I don't think we've had the chance in this group to talk about it before. And these are the microclimate data that you really provided a lot of terrific input for us in the winter about how to collect it, when to collect it, and where to collect it. This cart that you see on the screen here is Marty, and Marty collects that variable we talked about before, or the data that allows us to calculate the variable we talked about before, mean radiant temperature. So if we took that Marty cart and moved it just 6 feet to the right, of course it would move into the shade, and it would be showing us a completely different value than what it's observing in its current location because of the major difference in the solar radiation that's hit by the sensors. The air temperature is very likely identical between those two locations. It's not a particularly informative measure for understanding how human thermal comfort varies at this, quote, human scale that we're really interested in, and that we know is a priority for the city of Scottsdale from looking at various planning documents, talking to you all, and hearing guidance from staff. So the Marty cart was out and about in Scottsdale. Some of you may have seen the social media content documenting its movements. Here is where Marty went, 4 different transects. It covered each of these transects 4 times a day when it visited these different areas: Promenade, Old Town, Waterfront, near Old Town, and around Sky Song as well. These locations were selected because they offered a tremendous variety of different design features that we thought would be illustrative in highlighting how those design features may impact human thermal comfort. We absolutely do not have time to go through all of the results that Marty collected, but in case you've just introduced yourself to the report and are looking forward to volume 2, this is what you can expect. We have measurements made at many different locations representing those different design features. We happen to be looking at the waterfront locations. And the Marty data are summarized on panels that look like this one here. The length of the green and tan bars shows the mean radiant temperature at different locations. So for example, at location W15, which is this lattice stone artificial turf pattern that's exposed to the sun. That's where we had the highest mean radiant temperature at this particular location, more than 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Contrast that with location W12. We're on natural grass under the shade of a kind of a dense but small grove of palm trees. The mean radiant temperature there just above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So a 60-degree Fahrenheit difference in mean radiant temperature between these two particular environments. The red dots on this figure show the variability in air temperature. I think we could all agree that compared to what we're seeing with respect to mean radiant temperature, the variability in air temperature is essentially negligible. It's really these differences in the radiation load on the human body coming from the sun, coming from other surfaces that are of consequence in determining how comfortable people would be. We have a collection of thermal images that accompany the MARDI data. One interesting observation from our data, this lattice pattern of stone and artificial turf, or maybe somebody knows what it's formally called. This was in fact where we observed one of the highest mean radiant temperatures in any location, and absolutely the single highest surface temperature we observed anywhere in the city, in any single pixel of any image that we collected. And Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I have that right. Over 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And that was the artificial turf in between the stonework. Compared to the artificial turf, the stonework actually was quite cool there. And I know artificial turf is certainly a surface we'll be talking a lot about, especially in the context of the new water shortage declaration. We have thermal photography collected from helicopter to get a broader sense of what's happening at more of a meso scale compared to the micro scale data. Here's a sample of one of those thermal images. We're really just diving into those data right now. This thermal image shows us Indian Bend Wash, of course, and with guidance from staff and this commission, we've also installed some weather stations in and adjacent to Indian Bend Wash to try to get a sense of the cooling effect of this really important and well-recognized urban infrastructure that I think is a point of pride for the city. We were not able to find any documentation of exactly the cooling benefit it may provide to surrounding neighborhoods, and thus installed some weather stations which are collecting data at this very moment that we'll be analyzing soon. Moving into the recommendations portion of the document, there are 3 recommendations that are shown with some detail, 2 that will be coming in volume 2. My general thoughts on the recommendations is that we see a lot of alignment with city documents that are already on file. It is very clear that staff and previous commissions, a generation ago or 2 of staff, certainly recognize that heat is a challenge, certainly recognize that it's important to prioritize shade for pedestrians, certainly understand the relationship between the urban form and material choice and urban heat. But I think we could move forward in terms of specifics, whether it's strategies or targets for benchmarking and evaluation, or specific actions that we might take to achieve some of the recommendations. It's also my impression that the recommendations are probably, if we agree that cooling strategies are the priority, I think it's fair assertion, maybe staff would disagree, that the existing documents really help cool the city, or at least prevent it from warming when we're thinking about new development. But I'd say the existing documents are light when it comes to thinking about what we can do with existing infrastructure. And because those growth areas, Air Park, South Scottsdale, and Old Town, are already quite developed, there's not a ton of new growth expected there from what I understand. And those are the hottest portions of the city fairly clearly to us. If we want to think about cooling the city, we need to have a discussion about what we can do with existing infrastructure. And we would certainly elevate Southern Scottsdale, not necessarily the South Scottsdale growth area, but Southern Scottsdale more generally as a priority for cooling investments. The general categories of recommendations, as we mentioned, are increasing tree canopy. This process might start with a comprehensive urban forestry master plan, which we've seen neighboring jurisdictions pursue in recent years. We might encourage staff to think about a goal for minimum tree coverage in all census block groups. Some of our neighboring jurisdictions have a single target for the entire city, but given the vast contrast we saw in tree canopy between different neighborhoods, different census block groups, and our focus on equity societally, broadly, it might be more compelling to think about what a minimum is everywhere in the city. We could certainly think about some of our legal and policy levers and partnerships with tree-related organizations. Reducing dark surfaces is clearly a priority. Those are the hot places in the city, and the extent we can mitigate those will go a long way to changing what Scottsdale's urban heat island is, regardless of how we measure it. There are some suggestions here, some of these which we are quite familiar with through partnerships with some of the neighboring jurisdictions. And I know there'll be interest in this commission to think about shading over parking and perhaps alignment with development of solar energy facilities. Pedestrian shade is a real strength, real asset of the city so far. I think if we wanted to showcase Maricopa County and Arizona to the country or the rest of the world when it comes to innovative and well-designed shade structures, especially related to transit, I think we'd look right to some of the current development in Scottsdale. So our recommendations are more of what has already been working well, and there are some specific tools and pathways that we might follow to get there. We did hear from this commission and from staff and observed on our own that there's not necessarily great shade coverage at bicycle racks, water fountains, and other stopping points for those using active modes of transportation. And that could be an interesting avenue to explore as we move forward. Forthcoming in the next volume are the elements that we talked about before, including recommendations around waste heat and what might happen in City Hall to help us move forward toward a cooler Scottsdale. Just say thanks again. This has been a really exciting partnership for us. I think we've learned a lot, and hopefully we've been able to share a little bit of that learning with you. And although our official scope of work ends, the Urban Climate Research Center isn't going anywhere. We very much imagine that this will be a continuing dialogue in the years ahead. And Tim, a special thanks to you for all of the great guidance as we've all oriented ourselves to thinking about heat and cooling in Scottsdale. And with that, back to you.
Thank you, David. Just want to go over some of the next steps that we're considering at staff level. Short-term goals of 1 or 2 years. We're talking about strategies for a cooler Scottsdale to become a part or a component of the sustainability plan. We want to incorporate the story maps, which we had provided links to you all for, and include that into our Sustainable Scottsdale website, as well as the full plan will be posted on that website as well. We need to develop a tree ordinance to maintain our Tree City USA status. So that will be the first tree action that we're looking at trying to accomplish. We're also going to be assessing and strengthening ordinances, design standards, guidelines, possibly looking for other incentives for tree canopy coverage, intensity, and other heat island effects for shade, especially particularly in the growth areas. We can also talk with our facilities people about what we might be able to do for reflective roof surfaces on city properties. We have an energy analyst in the city at this time, and I know that would be something important to them as well for reducing the energy in the buildings. Longer term, we're considering a tree and shade or urban forestry plan, particularly in the growth areas, but also we're looking to develop recommendations and incentives and other programs for residential tree planting. So I think that's the important part about trying to balance the South Scottsdale neighborhoods with the rest of the city. We'll be inventorying shade and cooling amenities along walking routes, bicycle racks, public fountains, and increased shade in these locations. That is our presentation tonight. Again, we're here for questions and answers and any possible direction that you might want to provide to myself, David, or also City Council.
Thank you so much. Mr. Schlosser has a question.
I want to bring the commission back to the environmental award we gave to the Hyatt. And the reason I would mention this is because one of the elements of their presentation was the fact that they took the roof of their ballroom and turned it into a roof garden. The result of that was they cut their energy costs for air conditioning by 20%. So I think we have an example by a corporation about how to implement heat reduction strategies that also provide economic benefit to those people who do them. I was particularly taken aback very early in the presentation by the General Dynamics building and the size of the roof that is standing there bare of anything except it's black. And realizing that we should, or maybe the city council, or maybe the commission could recommend or develop a program to incentivize people who have large roof structures to incorporate roof gardens on those structures and therefore help supplement the placement of new trees in the creation of the urban forest. So I just wanted to put that sort of down. We actually have a good example of environmental stewardship by a corporation that adopted these strategies independent of anything that anyone had done. And I think we can take that message and bring it to other corporations and other real estate holders to try and impact the ever increasing temperatures that we're going to be seeing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlosser. Mr. Johnson, you have a question?
Yeah, the slide that he was just referring to is up on the screen. I don't know if you misspoke, Steve, but I think the black surface in this slide is actually parking lot and the white surface is roof. Yeah, I think you might have said that the roof was black. I just want to make sure that it's clear.
Yes, I stand corrected, but there's still a lot of roof. And if we do the analysis that says 2x impact of having canopy over 1x of asphalt, we could conceivably have a balance if those roofs were covered with plants and shrubs.
Thank you.
I just wanted to get that clarification. Then I have a question for Professor Handula, and I know that Commissioner Bronovich has his hand up, so we'll go to him in a second. But the question I have goes to return on investment and bang for your buck, I guess. Early on, we saw that trees and shrubs obviously create the greatest amount of cooling. I'm just thinking about, what investments, a lot of the recommendations here are, for additional study, which are obviously required. But I'm just thinking, and I don't know if I want to put you on the spot here, Professor Handula, about what you would say, if anything, about bang for buck in terms of mitigation tools, efforts. I think we're probably in a situation where we need all tools on the table, but I just throw it out there and see if you want to answer that or not.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. It's a terrific question. And unfortunately, I have to put my tail between my legs a little bit here on behalf of the urban climate community, and that we have not done a very good job in preparing ourselves to answer that type of question over the past 10 to 20 years. Fortunately, I think we've been beaten up enough in conversations like these where we are starting to turn the corner collectively and recognize that those types of specific cost benefit analyses are beginning to come online. And fortunately for us, the Nature Conservancy Arizona chapter will be coming forward with their economic analysis of the cost of action and inaction on heat mitigation and air quality mitigation in the very near future. I think there may be a public webinar even on the calendar for next week or the week thereafter. So I think we will get some clues there in terms of bang for the buck. I'd also suggest that this commission and staff also have a little bit of a role to play in what sort of bucks are we interested in focusing on? Are they bucks related to avoided hospitalizations and deaths? Are they bucks related to improved quality of life and people not burning their hands on their steering wheels in their hot cars in unshaded parking lots? Are they bucks related to air conditioning? I think the specific strategies we might pursue might not equally impact all of those different types of dollarizable benefits, if you will. So I hate to pass on the answer to your question, but I know that there's a more thorough answer coming in the relatively near future.
Thank you. I think we had Mr. Bronovich.
Thanks, Ryan. You stole a bit my my train of thought, which was also on kind of a cost benefit approach to this problem. And it seems like there is a focus on tree canopy and the urban forest, and I think that's great. I'm just a huge lover of trees. I think most people are. But I came home from vacation yesterday and found my yard of trees. Half of them were knocked down, and as they get bigger, I've been just the maintenance and just the cost of from an energy standpoint, water, labor. Trees are expensive. So my question really was around the cost benefit of more man-made shade structures versus tree canopy.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I think as we look to amend, and I feel your pain on the tree laws recently. I think as we move into our very final stages of revisions, I think we can do our best to point to some existing studies about tree-related cost-benefit analysis versus other structures to the extent that we can find them. Unfortunately, a lot of the national literature is really skewed toward the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic and places that have such a different circumstance than that we experience. But we'll do our best to see what we can add as we tidy up the report. Again, I think the answer varies a little bit depending on our objectives, but it's the question is well taken.
Thanks so much. Do we have anybody else that had a comment or a question? If we don't, the only comment question that I wanted to add, Dr. Hundula, was really in reference to the recommendations and how we came up with those. You have a lot of wonderful data that you have presented in the report, and I would love to see that tied into the recommendations more so that they can substantiate what types of effects we predict with the kinds of recommendations that we're making. And so, we can kind of quantify, if we increase shade by a certain amount, where are we able to address heat with that recommendation, with all of the different ones. I mean, being able to utilize your data to really try to put some benefits for these costs, it would be a great addition to this report.
Thank you, Chair Chris Mazar, and thank you for the excellent and more detailed feedback you provided than we're talking about here. Yeah, your point is well taken, and we will absolutely strive to do so in the final stages of revisions. And I might also add that we had an excellent recommendation from staff to try to make the recommendation section align a little bit more closely with what's in the 2035 general plan's implementation section, which maps all of the wonderful ideas into the general plan into, if I'm remembering correctly, 5 or 6 specific tools that are available, broad types of tools. And I think we can do the same in the recommendation section. I think it was in your comments and probably in many of our minds, the question of how specifically. And I think if we can parallel the language in this document with what's in the general plan, that'll at least streamline that conversation a little bit. So thanks to staff for that recommendation.
Thank you so much. I think Miss Tammy has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Tammy Bossy. One more thought is if there's a way to incorporate the cost of doing nothing in some of the thinking. We tend to think of everything as a cost up front of doing something, but I think the more that we continue to remind ourselves the cost of doing nothing is fairly astronomical, that I think we can move further faster. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. A terrific point, and you'll be very pleased to know that the cost of inaction is central to the Nature Conservancy report that I referenced earlier. The report is countywide, so we'll have to think about exactly what we can peel off to be relevant for our discussion. I just checked the calendar. They're having their final advisory committee meeting in the middle of September, and the final report should be available shortly thereafter. It looks like I have access to a draft of the report, so I'll talk to them and see what we can wiggle into this our Scottsdale specific report as well. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that we need to have some sort of base or null case as a point of comparison.
Thanks so much, Mr. Johnson.
I just have a procedural question, which is, I think I saw on one of the slides, and maybe this was mentioned, that this is going to be presented to the city council. So I guess my procedural question is, do we need to officially convey this as a commission to the council? Do we need to convey it with our recommendations, with our emphasis? Or is this just going to automatically go up and our input on it essentially ends now? I'm just curious.
I definitely think that your input is definitely warranted to give to the city council. I thought I did. Maybe I'm not talking close enough to the mic. No, that's one of the things that we asked for tonight is, are there some recommendations that you would like to make to the city council We are on kind of a short fuse. We're going to the city council on the 14th of September at this point for a study session item. It doesn't mean we can't provide more input to the council at a later date. It'll just not be folded in with that other presentation at that time.
I mean, at this time, I know I forwarded my comments, and I know that a couple other individuals have forwarded their comments. Is there a way that we can all see all of the comments?
Certainly. The comments that I'd received from the commission were yours and also Commissioner Kukolic's. So I can pull those together and get those out. If there are additional comments, that'll be great.
And can commissioners attend study sessions and speak? Is there public
Yes.
opportunity to speak?
Yeah,
On
there's,
behalf of ourselves, or I suppose we can't be the commission as attendees, can we?
I'll let Brent answer that.
Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Johnson, you can speak as a member of the public. You can speak representing the commission if the commission authorizes you to speak on behalf of the commission. So the commission could say, we authorize the chair or, Commissioner Johnson to relay our comments to the council at their meeting on the September 14th. So you can certainly do that.
So is that just something that we need to take a vote on to, actually formally designate someone as a representative?
Yeah, it's most helpful if you do that. Yeah.
I want to make the motion that the chair and one other designate represent the commission at the September 14th study session to bring to the council attention our recommendations on the urban heat island project.
I'll second that, Commissioner Johnson.
Do we need to go ahead and designate the other commissioner, I guess would be the question.
Is there anyone that wants to join me on the 14th?
I could check my schedule. I don't want to say yes now, but I'd be open to it unless somebody else wants to do it.
On the 14th I'm
Yes, it's the
confirming.
14th and it's an evening study session. This piece will be at the end of the regular meeting. It's a regular meeting study with a study session attached.
So it'd be middle of the afternoon or evening or?
It'll be in the evening. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a conflict till 5:30, so I don't know if that excludes me or not.
No, that would be fine because we're going to have a regular agenda item group of items that have to do consent items. They start at 5 o'clock. And then there'll be regular agenda items. I believe there are 2 or 3 general plan amendments on there.
I'm comfortable with going ahead and saying we're not designating the other person right at the moment, and then we can work it out.
Okay.
So I think the original motion didn't indicate a second person, so I think we're still good with that original motion.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, the key here is we want to make sure that the commission has authorized you and another commissioner of your, choosing or something like that to officially represent the commission at the meeting. It is really more helpful if there's something that they've really authorized you to say on behalf. But as long as we're kind of reading this into the record right now, so it's clear. I mean, I think that the concept here is that you're continuing to look at the rest of the comments that were made by the commissioners, then you're going to put something together on behalf of the commission, and there is likely going to be another commission member that's also going to speak.
Correct. I would second the motion. Oh, he seconded it. Brian's seconded it. So if we could go ahead and take a roll call vote on that.
Certainly, Chair. Chair Krisman Lazar.
Pass.
Pass. Vice-
Accept.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were passing on the issue. Okay. Vice Chair Coletta,
Accept.
Commission members David Abranovich,
Accept.
Commission member Tammy Bossi,
Accept.
Commission member Ryan Johnson,
Yes.
and Commission Member Stephen Slasher. Okay,
So it sounds like we are sorted on this particular matter. One point of clarification from Ms. Bussey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. So the comments would include tonight's discussion from this meeting, not just the written ones, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
If we are good, we have another wonderful individual in our audience here to speak with us about a very important topic. Ms. Gretchen Baumgartner from the Water Policy Group, or she is the Water Policy Manager, is here to discuss the public awareness and water conservation issues and communication of the effects of the formal drought announcement from the BOR.
Thank you for having me. Chair Chris Milazar, I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is Dave Handula, just saying thank you as we transition again, and we'll sign off for our part. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I apologize for not transitioning that better. We really appreciate all of your help here, and I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, and thank you all for the great guidance. Looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Ms. Baumgartner.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to be here tonight. I don't have a whole bunch of meat in this presentation as I've been here several times in the last couple of months. So I don't want to be super redundant with what I'm talking about. However, I did a couple of weeks ago talk to Tim, and we thought it was appropriate that I come and talk because Monday, just 2 days ago, we knew this was coming. The Bureau of Reclamation made the first historic shortage, a tier 1 shortage on the Colorado River system. Now, we were already in a tier 0, but this is a tier 1, which is deeper cuts into the system. So that declaration was made on Monday. You can see here from the chart, the chart here on the screen, and I know it's a little bit tough to see, but there are a number of tiers as the lake falls lower and lower. And what I presented, I believe back in June, was that even though we see the precipitation falling from the sky today, and we are all getting alerts on our phone, I'm sure we'll get a lot more. The wonderful monsoon that we have gotten this year, although is much appreciated and primes our watershed, the Colorado system is still in a drought. There's still the concept of climate change, and there's still the structural deficit on the system. So even though this is a great monsoon season, what's happening on the Colorado system and our supply is a serious issue. Before I move on to the next slide, I just want to quote Tom Bushotsky, who's the department head of the Department of Water Resources, in the news briefing. We are working collectively with Arizona stakeholders and the basin states to develop more adaptive measures consistent with the drought contingency plan and associated agreements. At the same time, ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources, and the Central Arizona Project will continue to work with partners within Arizona and across the basin to develop and implement longer-term solutions to share risk we all face in the Colorado River now and into the future. So outside of Scottsdale, this is a larger regional issue. And so we will do everything we can for our cities. But this is a larger regional issue. Okay, so the slide is not advancing. Sam, do you just want to advance it for me? Next slide. Yes, please. Apologize for this. We just have a little bit more technical difficulties. Thanks. The world we live in right now. Thank you. So even though the city of Scottsdale has a robust and diverse water supply, the Scottsdale Water made the recommendation to the city manager to go into our stage 1 drought management plan. By statute, all organizations have to have what's called drought preparedness plan. We call ours our drought management plan. So a component of the drought management plan will be the Scottsdale Drought Management Team. And that will comprise of more than just the water division. It will comprise of many other divisions that are appropriate to look at the situation we're in a more holistic manner. We'll discuss conditions and evaluate tools and programs that will best facilitate how to best use water efficiency, both internally to the city, but as well as communicate that externally to our customers. So we are, since the city manager has instituted our stage 1, we are going to get together for the drought management team and talk through how we as a city tackle this problem and communicate that to our citizens and internally to our staff. So before I kind of dive into some of the components of communication efforts, I wanted to remind the commission, I know I presented about this in June, these are just a number of bullets of our conservation program. We have a very robust conservation program. I'm going to dare to say one of the more robust conservation programs that I've been able to see. And so one of the issues with it, and we have a lot of tools available to all kinds of customers, both internally and externally, commercial, residential. One of the biggest challenges is to communicate those tools that are available to our residents and customers. So that's going to be the challenge of our stage 1. Our stage 1 drought management plan is going to be a communication level. It's the reason why we declared it is a heightened level of intensification of communication of how important it is to be efficient. We have planned for this. We have the water for the future, but we don't have enough water to waste. So efficiency is the biggest component, and every single customer and resident in Scottsdale is a component of how we move into the future. And communicating the tools available to them, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge. And so we did talk about having the assistance of the SEAC and able to move forward to do this. So some of the items that we've come up with internally have been using social media a lot more. We've come up with something called Water Wednesdays. We are increasing our frequently asked questions and new websites on our page. We are the first ones in the state of Arizona to enact our drought management plan. Whether or not the other cities and municipalities will do so, I'm unclear of, but we are the first ones to enact it. We are also, I'm happy to say, adding additional conservation staff. I'm very happy about that. It'll be exciting to have additional help to really get those programs moving forward. And we have an ask of the SEAC. We would like to make some conservation videos. So one of the biggest things is going to be social media and our YouTube channel and also the website, but getting out snippets of conservation videos. So we came up with a concept of doing 2 to 3 minute snippets of videos of how to be able to communicate that in small snippets. So we thought it would be a great idea to have potentially individual commissioners introduce specific ideas of videos. We would come up with the storyboard, and the communications team would come up with the videography and making it look very professional. But we were hoping that the commissioners would help us introduce specific topics to the public. There's a number of ideas here. This is not limited to what we want to do. We are welcome a number of ideas any commissioners have, but things like the smart water portal we have. Residential outdoor efficiency checks, which are widely popular, and we've found that absolutely saves water. The idea of how do you efficiently water your grass, which is a large issue with folks, and understanding water waste outside and efficiently using your water for functional portions of turf in their area. So, and then we have one other, and actually, Commissioner Schlesser, am I saying that correctly? Okay. We also have another idea, and it kind of goes along with the environmental award you were talking about, that one commercial entity with the garden is, we would like to showcase what we're calling a water warrior, or some kind of certificate or award program to those commercial entities or residents that are really moving the dial and investing in how they use water wisely. And being able to showcase those on our YouTube channel and our social media, so people can really see how residents are saving water and still keeping a beautiful internal and exterior lifestyle. So that's another way we would really like the commission to help us out, figure out what that criteria looks like, and the method to evaluate that criteria and how we can showcase those residents and commercial entities that are really going above and beyond sustainability in the water aspect of the world. So with that, like I said, it was a little short and sweet. I don't want to take up time from the commissioner, but if we have any questions with what's happening in the water world and how we move forward, I welcome those.
Mr. Schlosser?
This is Commissioner Schlosser. So maybe I should direct this to Mr. Stockwell. But the question is that if you're going to make a communication push, have you been given the budget to do such a thing? Or do we need, as a commission, to petition the city council to perhaps have an extraordinary budget addition so that we can get the message out? Because if you're limited to the funds that you have now, your messaging it's going to be kind of squeaky. I mean, you really need people to internalize the fact that conservation and efficient use of water is essential, not just for tomorrow, but for today. So that's a question I have.
So I don't know if I'm ready to answer that, or I'm probably not the appropriate person to answer, but internally we have started to have a conversation about what that looks like. Again, that's not appropriate for me at my level to answer that, but that is a conversation that we're starting to have we're starting to have that conversation, especially as we go into the next budget cycle of what could we do and would that need more funds? So I do appreciate your question.
And again, Commissioner Schlosser, one of the other elements I mentioned, the Hyatt and the fact that they had this roof garden, but they had an incredible number of water saving programs that they were using, basically entity wide. And I think that drawing on some of their experience would be of value. There may be other organizations that are, active, but the Hyatt made it just a point of pride to have a sustainable facility, and bringing that message out and trying to get organizations that have elements of their business model that are comparable, so they can say, okay, this is how much money this saved doing it this way. Because we have to really have a broad approach. There's the commercial needs, and then there's the residential need. One of my favorite topics, and I think I've probably driven everyone crazy here about it, is the soft water systems that recycle all year long, even when 40% of the residents are no longer in the area, and how a communication program to have them put their systems on vacation or turn them off when they're not here could save so much water over the summer.
I do appreciate those comments. The commercial sector, if you look a decade ago in conservation, it was really honing in on residential, and the commercial sector is one of the next horizons of using water efficiently. And a lot of organizations are starting to build their outreach program into those sectors. Now, some of the problem is the upfront investment cost to those organizations. And so building the conversation around, like you said, you make those investments, but there's long-term payback for that. We are starting to have conversations with those customers, but we do need to have them a lot deeper and more. So it's great to have those examples like the Hyatt. I know we've worked with Honor Health with some of their efficiency and some of the things they have done, but we need to highlight the examples of some of those commercial entities more. I agree.
Thanks for that. Ms. Bossy?
Thank you. In support of Commissioner Schlossler's suggestion, what if the Hyatt is one of our early videos that we're able to do to highlight an award winner, since it's one of our own, and maybe that would inspire some other actions. Thank you.
Yeah, I will bring that back to our public information officer, and we'll yeah, absolutely consider that. And I don't know if our conservation staff has had conversations with the Hyatt or not, but I will definitely ask them and explore that. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. This is not just, obviously, this is not just a City of Scottsdale issue. This is a state issue. This is an entire Colorado River watershed issue, multiple states. So I appreciate everything that the city's doing, but it'd be great to have some leadership at the state level. It'd be great to have some leadership at the entire watershed level. But setting all that aside, I know we're a resort town. We're a golf town. But does the city have any point of view? Does the council talk about turf, residential turf? Or, I mean, my impression is it's water intensive. We just heard, a few moments ago that it has a cooling effect, which is nice. We know artificial turf does the opposite, which is a little scary. The city offered an incentive for people to replace turf. I took advantage of that a year ago, which was great. But, it's going to take carrots and sticks, I think, to take care of this issue or to help mitigate this issue. But I'm just pondering the issue of turf. I don't know if you have heard city council conversations about turf, or if there's any policy about turf on city property, or just a very broad question about turf in the city.
I don't know if I'm the appropriate person to answer that. I don't know if Mr. Sockwell could answer that a little bit better than me, as being a little bit closer to council. As far as on city property now, the turf that we do have on property, I think that's one of the portions of the messaging campaign that we need to be better at doing. So when people first look at any facility, a part of any city, they first will look at at anybody's park, because obviously there's turf all over the place. So our parks department got together about a decade and a half ago and said, how can we do better? So they really, long before any of this became a bigger crisis. Now we knew it was coming, but the Parks Department really ratcheted down and got their efficiency under control. And that's one of the components of our messaging campaign that we'll do, is talking about how we've been really good about taking out turf where we didn't see the functionality of it, or not overseeding except for very specific 2 areas of the city that we do, or being as efficient as we can in the summer. The Parks Department has done a wonderful job. Now, as far as other city facilities, we've actually done a really great job over the last 3 years of doing facility audits. The Water Department has a bucket of money to spend on a professional auditor who will come and check city facilities. Over COVID, a portion of that money was supposed to go to outside commercial entities, but because commercial entities didn't want any of that, we did a large majority of our facilities over the last year. And right now we're talking with facilities on how to implement some of those water saving plans. And so that'll also be a part of our communication strategies, but talking with facilities and figuring out how we can implement some of those and be better internally. So we have done those, we just haven't been able to message those correctly. And that's a part of this campaign.
When the city's done residential turf removal rebates, are those wildly popular? Do they run out of money right away, or how do those work? Do they work well?
So several years ago, we got our rebate budget increased, and it works really well. We've had some popularity within it. It would be great to have a more number of people who do it. It can be obviously resource intensive for the resident. We've also had some issues with folks communicating to us that landscapers are having a challenging time with labor and also their own resources. So it's been a little bit slow this year, unfortunately. We are gonna look next rebate cycle to potentially upping some of the incentive money for those turf removals. One of the bigger things will be having a conversation with some of the HOAs in their turf, either a turf removal or a budgeting scheme. So we have a new program where we're doing budgeting for HOAs. And I think that's one of the bigger items that we can do too, is get people understanding exactly how much water they need to put on turf and you don't have to do anymore. That is a challenging for some of those big turf facilities.
Thanks for that. Do we have anyone online that has any questions? No, we're good. Ms. Bossy has another question.
I think to piggyback on Commissioner Johnson's question about turf, who is doing most of the analysis about the pros and cons of it? Because we're trading off a lot of heat, as we just got illustrated, 180 degrees for removing turf. That's pretty substantial data there. So I'm wondering who in the city is working on understanding that. Thank you.
The balance between the heat island effect and also our water supply in the desert is a tough one. And there's been a lot of research on it. The ASU has done and a lot of other universities have done. So I think we'll need to find a balance. I mean, we can cool the whole city, but we can also run out of water. Or we can take out every single tree and every single turf and not run out of water, but we'll heat up. So there will be a balance. What you should know is a part of our rebate program, which is why it can be complicated to institute for a homeowner, is we require at least 25%. When someone takes out turf, they have to have 25% canopy cover. And so we go out and measure that and make sure that someone complies with that. We also instituted, like we said, artificial turf. People have a tendency to really love, and it's hard to have a conversation that also adds to the heat island effect. So this next rebate cycle, we put a cap on how much people can put in artificial turf, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 square feet, and anything beyond that. And you'd be surprised, there's some residents who want a decent amount of artificial turf. We will not give them a rebate because artificial turf will enter the heat island. So it is definitely a balance. And we do evaluate that every single rebate cycle. And it is probably worth having a bigger conversation with some researchers like ASU to find out if there is a better balance to the policies we have inside our rebate.
And this just made me think a little bit more about Xeriscape and our wonderful study that was just performed, and possibly asking ASU in their studies to focus in on some of the xeriscaped areas to tell us what benefits those particularly that landscape can provide. I mean, we have the xeriscape garden that's over at Chaparral Park. It is, just an awesome example of what's possible. And I do think that, being able to have some hard data associated with that would be interesting and useful for our water conservation efforts.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I know that there are other researchers at ASU have done that to find the balance between what a desert lush landscape could look like and save water, but also mitigate heat. I agree.
Just working with ASU, from my perspective, I think that, sorry, I'm not talking in the mic. I think that their perspective is that tree canopies are what we should be shooting for. And you can do xeriscape, like you've said, in our environment, but you do need to do an investment in the tree canopy. And that's something that we'll need to look at as to what that percentage should be. So, and the trees are more water efficient than turf. I mean, that's just one of the things about them.
Thanks for that. Any more questions for Ms. Baumgartner?
Thanks for coming back and re-updating this.
Yes, we
absolutely.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you for having me here this evening. And anytime you need an update, I am here to communicate anything that is possible.
Thank you so much. And I am looking for volunteers. I think she has some wonderful ideas about ways that we can help. So if you are interested, please let me know and I will coordinate making certain that she knows who is interested. Thank you so much. Our next item on the agenda has to do with our presentation, discussion, and possible commission recommendation regarding a letter to the city council regarding city support of and education about the protection of plant pollinators. And here I just wanted to note that this letter is still in development. We don't have it available at this particular time for discussion. However, there has been some wonderful work that has been done in the interim. And I would hope that Mr. Johnson would be able to give a little bit of an update on that.
Sure, thank you. And just to reiterate what you just said, my apologies for not getting the letter in process quickly enough. And, we had a little bit of back and forth, but we got to do things the proper way. So thanks, Brent Stockwell, for making sure we're doing things the right way. So again, this is Commissioner Johnson. The letter that I've drafted, just to sort of outline it a bit, talks about the conversation that we had, I think it was 2 meetings ago, after a personal experience I had in my backyard with a swarm of bees that, was going to be basically half cost and exterminated within about an hour versus having someone come out and humanely remove the bees. It was going to take a couple of days and, a few $100 more. So just, it was eye-opening for me. And I think some people around the table here as well. So the letter just conveys that anecdote. And then it mentions the fact that we have made some modifications with the help of Kelly Corset to the fire department page. Previously, the fire department page had a page on bees and snakes, and it was largely about how dangerous bees were to humans. And so we've just added some language in there about how important they are as pollinators as well. They're not only our enemies. In fact, they're not our enemies at all. The letter also mentions the fact that the city council in early 2020 adopted I think it was the mayor's Monarch Butterfly Challenge, if I'm getting that correct. Pledge, thank you. That was an initiative that is not too far off from Bee City USA, which is something that I discovered in doing some very light research. Bee City USA is a national organization. I believe there's 144 cities, but we could be the first in Arizona to be a Bee City USA designee. There's 5 or 6 criteria that are listed in the letter that come off the website, including things like we need to create a commission. We need to do a pro-pollinator event, 1 per year. We need to do an application and a couple of other things. So just to preview the letter and, the website, the fire department, as I mentioned, the fire department page has already been modified slightly, and the Sustainable Scottsdale page, I think, has also been modified slightly. So that's an update from me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would definitely recommend anyone to go ahead and take a look at the Sustainable Scottsdale webpage. It does have now an actual information page with pollinators and bees, and it's great. They put a lot of useful information there for us to reference. Mr. Schlosser.
Hi, I have a question actually for staff and for Brent. So one of the issues that came up is we cannot, as a city, recommend any vendor relative to, we can't take a side and say these people are the ones we suggest. Would it be possible to do kind of survey of the exterminator or pest control companies to determine which ones offer a humane service for addressing bees? And then if we had a list of those companies, post that list without suggesting that any one of them is better than any other on that same website, and also making that list available to the fire department and to emergency services so that people can be directed towards a website that has a list of these companies that may deal humanely with bee infestations. So that's a question for staff and also for Brent.
I can address that. We cannot recommend vendors. We can't show that context at all. But I think that the City of Chandler's website, which Brent had brought forward earlier, they do it very well. It's if you want to look at humane bee removal, it takes you out to a Google webpage and starts your search. So you can start to search it that way rather than us giving support of some other different vendor and then finding ourselves at odds with other vendors that are out there. So
Thanks for that. Mr. Brent?
Yeah, if I
Stockwell?
could add a couple things. So if you go to scottsdaleaz.gov or and search pollinators, or you just type into your favorite search engine, City of Scottsdale pollinators, it'll come to the bees and butterflies page. And of course, what Commissioner Johnson is suggesting is very similar to a pledge the city took a number of years ago about monarch butterflies, similar commitments. We actually are really worked hard to update the information that we have on there. And it already says that the City of Scottsdale recommends humane removal of bees and goes on to explain that further. And then what we were able to do is we were able to link out in a link to learn more about bees, which actually takes you to the Bee Conservancy website, which really provides more information for people about how they can do humane removal. So we felt that was a really good step in that direction, that it's helping to educate people, but yet not kind of pointing people toward any individual providers. But we're continuing to look at that. And if you follow any of Scottsdale's social media too, particularly over the last week, I've noticed quite a lot of pro-pollinator posts. So the message has got across, and we really appreciate, that all came about as a result of a couple meetings ago. And we learned that we could do better on this subject. And so I think we're trying to push a more pro-pollinator message out. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. We appreciate your efforts. Ms. Bossy?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So since the city and most government entities have an RFP type of a process, could we do something along those lines and put out an RFP to vet certain companies in some way and work some kind of a more appropriate list based on a very organized RFPs process? So again, I guess a question for you, Mr. Stockwell.
Further to that, Mr. Stockwell, one of the items that has been brought up is that, a lot of the purveyors of this service are smaller entities and may or may not actually have the ability to get the types of insurance requirements that the city requires. And that was one of the barriers to entry for some of these smaller relocation firms. Is there something that we can think of that is out of the box that can address that limitation?
Sure.
Good answer.
Mr. Brown?
Just moving along those lines, the humane bee removal sounds and is a great idea. It really is. But when you think about a small entity, the majority are mom and pop operations. They remove a beehive. Where do they put it? In an urban area. And the liability associated with their very service brings in that level of ratchets up the insurance requirements for the very nature of their service. So it's like anything in our social, trying to find the best path forward, there are always challenges and obstacles.
Can I address
Thank you.
that? This is Commissioner Schlosser.
Mr. Schlosser?
I appreciate that, Sam, but we also have this small Sonoran Reserve, which covers a third of the land of the city of Scottsdale, if not more. And couldn't we designate areas within that reserve where people who do this for a living can relocate a hive in a bee box or beehive box in these areas? Because anyone who goes hiking in there is putting themselves at the exposure of all of the fauna and flora that exist in the desert anyway. And in fact, I think there are even signs when you're in the parking lot that says, hike at your own risk, bring lots of water, watch out for these things. So I think that can be addressed by using the open space that the city has and designating areas within that open space where beehives can be safely relocated. That's just a suggestion. I certainly appreciate the idea of not wanting to relocate it in the entertainment quarter, but I wonder if we couldn't designate areas within the geography for the safe placement of hives that are a threat to the public where they are found.
Thanks for that, Mr. Stockwell.
Yeah, so I figured I'd expand on my sure response from earlier, trying to balance out the length of my responses. With regard to the insurance requirements, our risk management director is able to waive insurance requirements in some cases. So there's a way forward on that. And I think there's also some, other creative things that we can do. And I think that's why I think Commissioner Johnson's proposal to, take this action and really kind of explore some of these things more fully is a really good idea. The other thing to think about with the pollinator issue is while there's not a lot of large farms in Scottsdale, there are a lot of large farms just to the east at Salt River. And perhaps there's an opportunity to work very closely with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community for relocation on hives on areas where they can actively work with the crops that are out there. I think there's a lot of things to think about. I think it's a good idea to get some experts on this area and get some information and take action. That's assuming that the commission does recommend that at a future meeting and the council does accept your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Brown, did you have a comment there? Okay, thank you so much. If there aren't any further comments, do we have any comments online? Anybody? Okay.
Can I just add one? This is
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson. Can I just add one point on Tammy's? I think Natalie and Tammy both kind of touched on this, and then the sure answer. We had some staff, if I recall correctly, do a brief study of what happened in the first half of 2021 with the city in relation to bees. And there was 119 calls or something. I'm probably quoting out of context, but just the question of can the city designate a humane bee removal service as an official provider of city bee removal? I mean, I don't know if the case is right now that the only solution in the city is extermination because of the no, it's not. Okay.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
not. It's just in the case where there's
If it's
danger.
urgent, human life threatening.
Yeah, exactly. Then we'll go ahead and exterminate because it does take a couple of days, like you mentioned, to
Yeah.
get somebody out. So
I'm thinking out loud about whether there's something needs to be added to the letter to say, we'd like the city council to consider humane bee removal as a official service, but it doesn't sound like we need that.
I don't believe so. Sam, you'd spoken with Jody Pierce, is that right?
This is Sam. I spoke with the parks manager, and they, the numbers I saw, they averaged about 2 calls a week over a 6-month period. That's a lot of removals. I'm trying to find a home for those. And the humane services would take anywhere from 2 to 4 days to respond, which was a non-starter. And that was by far the greatest impediment, not the increased cost, was not knowing when they were going to show up. Just due to the high demand in an urban area with all this lush vegetation, that just promotes bee propagation versus the Sonoran preserves, say, where much less attractive, but you've got to admit this urban environment we live in is prime bee habitat. They propagate and expansively. So like I said, I think over a 6-month period, they were averaging 2 calls a week.
And were any of them, this is Natalie Chris Mozart, were there any of them that were actual relocations, or were they all exterminated?
Say that again.
Were there any of those calls that were relocations, or was that pretty much all to the exterminator?
Those calls were mainly through the city personnel themselves in the maintenance of the park and median areas around the water utility boxes and things like that, that presented a direct hazard to passersby or the people trying to access the utility boxes and things like that. Thank you.
Can I just ask, humane removal is an option for the city. I understand it may not be the best option, right, in terms of cost and time, but it is an option, correct?
Affirmative.
Okay.
The biggest drawdown and what the last humane removal service the city had, they dropped us. They
Okay.
said, we cannot keep up with the demand. We cannot meet your requirements. We would rather go at our pace with the residential. We'll service you when we get there type thing. So, but from my inquiry, there is nothing prohibiting humane removal within city operations. Thank you.
Ms. Bossy.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last, I guess, request then. Can we explore the possibility of an RFP and figure out what incentives maybe we could institute right now for the humane bee removals? Because again, the city is contracting with someone. And if we feel this is an essential, urgent environmental survival concern, maybe it's worth a little extra effort to figure out how to overcome some of our obstacles that we're facing right now with the humane bee removal companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any specific actions that we want to take on this matter at this particular time?
We've got a letter in draft that we didn't share today, but it'll be shared before next time. And I can't remember the rules, but I hope we can circulate it. And if Commissioner Bossy wants to add some language or a paragraph based on her comment just now, I think we should look at it. I can't remember how we draft things around here. Maybe someone can help me out here.
Yeah, you can send the comments to me and I'll relay them.
Okay.
Thanks for that, everyone. The next item that we have on our agenda is a discussion and possible commission recommendations to staff on public outreach strategies for sustainability topics currently under consideration by the commission. We don't have anything specific on this particular item unless anybody has anything to raise at this point. If I don't hear anything, I think I'd like to go to the next item, which is discussion and possible commission recommendations to staff on promoting public awareness of green events and sustainable practices during the Canal Convergence Public Art event. Tammy, would you like to give a brief update on that? I can if you would like.
Thank you. I'll just start very generally, then if you'll add in, given that I was dealing with some personal family issues at the time, but we had the meeting to discuss what the Canal Convergence is doing, past, present, and future. And certainly a lot of enthusiasm for having sustainable actions to continue within the Canal Convergence. Very appreciative of the solid waste efforts to make the zero waste goals doable. So they've very much committed to that. They made it very clear that it would be extremely difficult to do that across all events at this moment. And we discussed possibly requiring budgets for people who wish to have events in Scottsdale to be able to pay for those kinds of services. He talked about this Strombo. the representative from the city solid waste department talked about what their biggest challenges with an open air event. People bring in all kinds of different things, and it's harder to control the types of waste in the event. So therefore, the costs were higher in order to be able to sort those kinds of things. So we had some just general discussions about the challenges, and this year is focused on technology. Years past, we had a little more direct focus on sustainability. And so they pretty much have their systems in place for this year and their plans. And most of anything that we might recommend would be related to next year's event. However, they followed up with us since then and are continuing to be very, very enthusiastic about all of their sustainability efforts for the Canal Convergence Program.
I did see two opportunities for possible collaboration for this November upcoming event. One is associated with the greening events guide that we discussed previously in previous meetings, previous years. The ASU greening event guide is something that ASU put together. Scottsdale looked at it and said, it's a great resource. However, there is a possibility that we think we could have something that would be more user-friendly for Scottsdale events. And we could work on trying to develop something like that for Scottsdale events and showcase that for this particular event. It is something that it was developed partially by some of the individuals in our public information office. And it is something that we could continue to move forward with. And again, kind of showcase for that particular event. That's one item. Another item is the Arts Foundation has partnered with one of the schools here locally, with one of the high schools, to come up with, I believe, a particular art piece, an art installation that focuses on sustainability. And it might be something that we as a commission can highlight and go ahead and make known a little bit more fully. That might be something that we wanted to kind of support and do some amount of public engagement on that effort portion of the event. And I guess the third piece, they do need people to help in the zero waste objective. And that really is people that kind of monitor people throwing away trash. Anything that isn't thrown away properly has to be sorted on the back end. And so they do need resources and people, and that might be something that we could help out with, either volunteering ourselves or coming up with trying to put together a team to help that effort. So that is another way that we could help this year's actual event. Other than that, I mean, looking long-term, I think we need to get involved, in future activities. But those three items are proposals that I would have as ways that we could help support this very important event that showcases not only sustainability, but art in our city. Mr. Schlosser.
Now, I may need to be corrected on this. I believe we have a tourism commission. Is that correct, Mr. Stockwell? Do we have a commission that, much like ours, that's focused on tourism?
Correct. The Tourism Development Commission.
Okay. I think that I would like to suggest that our commission interface with the Tourism Commission, make them aware of the ASU document and see what their thoughts are about it. Plus, there's another individual who's responsible under your direction, I believe, for tourism.
You talked about ASU's greening events guide.
Right, we're talking about ASU's greening events guide. So maybe what we need to do is try and get a broader consensus about what is possible within Scottsdale, because I know that the ASU guide was, it was incredibly detailed, and it ended up listing events as platinum events, gold events, silver events, and maybe a little bit too complex for the city to implement, but maybe working with the other commission and with the city director for tourism, we could come up with something that is a start and see whether or not organizations that are planning events within the city would be interested in compliance with that. So, I mean, again, we could, call them a platinum, or we could use the same recognition status. And maybe we could even offer incentives for people who are planning events here to consider it as a sustainability effort. But I just wanted to sort of mention those two elements, because if we just take this as our own charter and run forward with it, we're going to be playing in somebody else's sandbox. And invariably, when you do that, they don't like the fact that you're there. So better to have them involved at the beginning and come to council with a recommendation, a joint recommendation supported by staff, than to unilaterally come to the council with something we think about and then have other commissions and staff members whose responsibility, take, I wouldn't say umbrage, but certainly the degree of skepticism about what we were proposing would come up.
Thanks for that. Do we have any other items?
I'll let Commissioner Bossy speak
Ms.
first, and then I
Bossy.
can add some
I'm
context.
gonna attempt a motion. So
Oh, sorry, Mr. Stockwell.
Okay, well, I'll add a little bit of context for that. So all of the points are in the same place. So the Tourism Events Department has the contract with Scottsdale Arts, which Scottsdale Public Art runs the Canal Convergence. They run the special events program, and they're already on board with the green events program. The biggest barrier to implementing it has been the pandemic, where most events were canceled. The Tourism Development Commission is also supported by the Tourism Events Department. The Sustainable Scottsdale Steering Team, the staff team met and talked about the green business and green events program. And we actually built that into the job description for the new sustainability director. So we are certainly intending to implement those programs, but we want to get that person hired and have them lead it. We didn't want to start the program before they were here. The other thing I want to mention is that tourism events is in the middle of starting the new 5-year tourism strategic plan. In the old 5-year strategic plan, one of the items on there was developing new signature, events for the city. And we hired a consulting firm called Webb Group, and they went out and looked at a ton of possibilities. And the recommendation that resonated most with the group that was working on the strategic plan was a sustainability event. They were thinking about launching a new one, but then they realized Canal Convergence was already our largest one, and they could embed it in that. So they had reached out to Canal Convergence or public art staff at that time. They completely embraced that idea. The event is already a celebration of water, art, and light, and water meaning the most sustainability. Also interactivity, so people's interactivity with environment and sustainability. It's one of the stated goals of Canal Convergence. One of the big projects they did last year was to work with a designer to design, recycle, and add recycling along the canal, so that it was not only a part of the event, but it was part of that. And they've both Scottsdale Water and Solid Waste are very involved in sponsoring that as well. So there's completely an openness to do that. I think there's always, can you always do more? Absolutely. But I don't think you necessarily have to convince anyone of the green events. I think we've already had that recommendation from the commission in the past. We're still working through it. And I don't think you have to convince Canal Convergence to be, and Scottsdale Public Art to be more environmentally friendly. I think they see it as a huge part of their mission. The one thing that might require a recommendation at some point in time is the last point that Commissioner Schlosser, sorry. We're all having trouble with your name tonight, so it's only one more month to go, and we might learn it by then, right? Yeah, I mess up my own name, sorry. Is the incentives piece of that. So if the city would want to get to the point where there would want to be an incentive through fee reduction or some other thing to encourage events to adopt sustainable practices in the green events, I think that is something that would require a recommendation council action at that point. I know that's much longer than my sure response, but I did want to add to that because I think, sometimes you feel like you're trying to push, the city and other organizations forward. I think in this one, there's a full embrace of wanting to do this and looking for opportunities to do it further. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that my point was more not just about canal convergence, but trying to promote other events as green events.
Yeah, and I've talked to the events manager, and she's very supportive of that as well. And we're just looking for opportunity to implement further. But I know the biggest thing on green, the biggest thing on green business and green events was the pandemic. And then we also were challenged on the green business program because the water department was leading that, and then the person that was leading that left. So as we had a conversation looking for a new home for this, and we were looking around a number of places, and we just said, this is a perfect opportunity for the sustainability director to be involved, to advise this on this and work with the commission and the community to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hearing that trying to work on a guide is not a useful thing at this particular time, but to support the new sustainability manager in the future.
And we'll need to, as soon as they get on board, they'll need to develop a work plan and work with you guys for feedback to make sure we have a good plan forward on it. So thank you.
Ms. Bossy.
Okay, taking all of that in, and I think the summary of my thought is that to recommend that we do prioritize at the appropriate time when we do have our new staff person, we do prioritize the greening events, the completion of the great work that was already started with an actual Scottsdale green events guide, which is kind of where you started the conversation, I think. So whether or not this is the time to have a recommendation for that or we wait, but it would also be paralleled with formalizing some kind of an incentive and or requirement for greening up events in Scottsdale. So I guess my question is this the time to make some kind of a formal action related to that, or maybe look at that for next time?
I think that once the sustainability manager is in place, we would work with that individual to further that endeavor.
And my thinking was that I totally agree, except that I was thinking we could get a head start on it since it was a project already started. That this is a priority once you land, because we generate so much waste in all of our events. So that's kind of where my thought was going. It's a general recommendation to prioritize that within the city to complete our own Scottsdale greening events guide, since the city felt like it's more important for us to have our own events guide rather than just take on ASU.
I totally appreciate that. But I mean, we are right in the process. They just closed on the sustainability manager position. So I think we can wait a month or two.
Okay.
That'd be my recommendation.
And I can say that the events manager in the tourism events department had already taken that and worked through that and already started to talk to event producers about how to incorporate it. There was some interest, and then the pandemic hit. So, literally the only events that are going on right now is, this one is finally being planned, and they've been, relatively small. So I think there's a great opportunity for it. It just, we were ready to take the leap on it right after the tourism season in 2020. And then lo and behold, it's a year and a half later, unfortunately. So thank you.
My thinking is kind of like when the travel industry was slowed down too. Now's the time to fix the engine. So, I mean, I think it's almost the time now before we start launching a bunch of events. Well, we have a little bit of downtime to look at those things. So I certainly appreciate all the efforts and the focus on that's happening. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Does anyone have any other thoughts on canal convergence? Do we want to support it in any other manner?
Would you like an update at a future meeting from Canal Convergence, particularly about that? So you can provide feedback. We can arrange for that.
Okay. I mean, I just had two other suggestions too, that, working with promoting the school project and or actually promoting volunteers for the Canal Convergence event. Those were two other options that I discussed.
So I guess I would certainly support your idea of the ambassador, so to speak, out there, and to promote volunteers to help educate people on proper recycling processes if we feel like that's something we might want to do.
I think that you mentioned high schools, and I'm thinking that getting teenagers or maybe even college students in the School of Sustainability to be part of that ambassador program. I mean, the high school students need credits for, I don't know what, I can't come up with the word, but they have
Service learning.
That's you. So they have service requirements, and certainly we can take the energy of college students who are engaged in getting a degree in sustainability to help promote that at the Canal Convergence. And if you get a bunch of senior people, that's one thing, but if you get a bunch of enthusiastic young people, that's a much better thing, because they'll be the first ones to point things out, whereas people my age will probably clear our throats and start off with a lecture.
Well, thanks for that. I will go ahead and give that feedback back to Canal Convergence individuals to see if that is something that they would like from us. And we can report back on it on the next meeting. If there's anything else that anyone wants to bring up about Canal Convergence. Ms. Tammy?
Thank you, Chair. Just Commissioner Soschler's continue the challenge with the last name after all these years. That made me think of Greenlight Solutions at ASU. So I think that might be a good connection point with Greenlight Solutions to join us on a project like that, and also make some additional recommendations, since that's what they do, is they join up with organizations and make recommendations on how to green things up. So that would accommodate both of those ideas. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Our last item, actually next to last item, is our staff updates. So Mr. Connor, do you have any updates, general updates?
Yes, I do. We were approached again by the Scottsdale Water Academy, Citizen Water Academy. They're reserving a place for us if we want to take it on. And I was trying to look back to see who hasn't been, and I'm not sure I can answer that. Is there anybody in the room that you have not been? Okay. It starts on Wednesday, September the 15th. I'll give you the information and I'll let them know your name and they'll get in contact with you.
Does that constitute my enrollment right there, or do I need to take action? I'm willing and happy to do it.
It's fine. I'll go ahead and get this.
Can you enroll me? Thank you.
Yeah. Very good.
Drink the water.
Yeah, drink the water, drink the Kool-Aid. The other thing, I just wanted to remind the board that we have our sunset review coming up, scheduled for October the 18th at 4 p.m. If we're intending to give them any other additional input, they need it by Friday, September the 24th. And I'm not sure what the time would be, but I always figure at least by noon is a good time frame. There's no real need to give additional information unless there's something specific you want to highlight. You can do that. That's fine. And we don't necessarily have to have the chair and the vice chair there, but you're welcome to attend as well.
And so the additional information Friday, 24th, and the actual commission
Is October the 18th.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's all I have. Go ahead.
On that.
Ms. Bossy.
Thank you. Last time we did this, we actually had a pretty detailed document that was submitted. So I'm not sure if we want to try to take a stab at it. And I actually went with the chair, and I was not either chair, I was not vice chair at the time. But just remembering the past process, there was a document generated and two of us went.
Okay, thank you. I will follow up with you after the meeting. Thank you.
I
Mr.
would
Schlosser?
like to say that was approximately 4 years ago.
It's a 3-year cycle.
3-year cycle. 3 years ago, the commission had a much lower profile, and sustainability was a word that wasn't even mentioned. And so we were doing a justification of why we existed. I think at this point in time, SEAC is probably the most recognized commission that the city has outside of planning. And I think that while it certainly is worthwhile for us to point out some of the things we've done, the detail that we had to come up with last time was because the people doing the review had no idea we even existed. I think people know we exist now.
Thanks so much for that. Any other comments? Tim, are you going to give any green building updates?
Anthony is out of town, and what's going on right now is the Green Building Lecture Series, which has become a webinar series, is put on hold during the summer. So he'll be starting the planning for that coming up shortly. I think his plan is to start the first webinar in October, and he will do it then every other month is what his plans are. As far as the rest of the program goes, he's developing the codes and things like that, which you all had discussed earlier. So
In reference to that, was it clear in our communication that we recommended the 100% for the fountains?
yes, that was clear.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just say, this is Ryan Johnson. Can I just say the webinar that was a month or two ago about the couple who's rebuilding their house in McCormick Ranch to the complete sustainability of every single system and aspect of that home. It's an astounding build that they're going to do. I recommend people watch it. I recommend that we keep our eye on it as a commission. This is going to be like an Architectural Digest case study because what they're doing is going to be incredible.
Ryan, would you be able to share that with the rest of the commission?
The link?
The link? Yeah, that would be great.
It's I don't know. There's a page for
Yeah, I think it's on their green building page.
green building page.
Okay.
I'll look to make sure, but if not, we'll talk with Anthony and get some contact.
They were talking about systems, home systems that I've never even heard of. Tammy probably be interested in this too. It's an amazing thing that they're going to do there.
Yeah, it was an excellent program.
That's awesome. We have my last update here for Sustainable Scottsdale Steering Team from Mr. Stockwell.
Sure. Chair, members of the commission. First thing is the sustainability director position closed on the 16th. And last I heard, we had more than 30 applicants for that. So we'll be reviewing that, going through an application process and selecting interview process and selecting the candidate soon. So that's very good. We also had our monthly Sustainable Scottsdale Steering Team. Similar to this meeting, the primary focus of that meeting was the Cooler Scottsdale presentation. So we also had a presentation from Professor Handula and how we could ask our questions and provide input into that as well. So that was very effective. I looked back on my notes from the meeting, and I think although there were a ton of updates from all the different areas, the primary thing I wanted to mention is that a contractor has been selected for the solar project at the North Corporation Yard, and that contract is slated for council approval also on the September 14th agenda. So that may be something for those of you that'll be attending to look at that. Might want to also submit a comment about that as well, just expressing your support for that. So we are really shifting our gears to prepare for the new sustainability director, and then quite a lot of considerable effort on the sustainability plan and supporting that. And as you know from your last meeting, Tim had provided an update about that. We have staff continuing through the ICLEI cohort, and we're also have a core team that will help support the sustainability plan through. And that's really going to be the primary effort of the Sustainable Scottsdale Steering Team over the next year. is supporting that and working through that and providing feedback and input on that. So very good. Thank you.
We're very excited about it. Thank you so much. Anybody else have any questions? We are on to item number 8, which is anticipated agenda items for September. Mr. Schlosser?
I would like to know if I could have 5 minutes to address the commission.
Of course.
Thank you.
I think, will it be your last meeting?
Yes, it will be.
So recognized. Thank
Thank
you. We're very sad.
Can I just tag on to that? This is Ryan Johnson. I'm not aware of when commissioners' terms expire. I don't know if there's a mechanism to make, for example, I'm sorry to hear that your last commission meeting will be next time, but my interest in asking is, I would like to make sure that some people who come before the city council for the commission, for example, represent more diversity. There's all kinds of different diversity, of course, in the world, but I just like to know who's due when, I guess.
Well, Steve is exiting on, I think it's the 16th of October. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
So the last meeting that I can officially attend will be September's meeting, because the meeting afterwards is October 19th.
I believe so. Commissioner Abranovich is also coming due on his first term, so he would be able to re-up if that's something he's interested in. That should be coming forward shortly, because I know that right now they're in a cycle before that. It'll be going to council, I think, on the 14th while we're there to go ahead and make appointments. So there's not an appointment for our commission on that meeting, but it will be in the future meeting sometime probably in October. So if there's applications that need to be put in, they need to go now, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
There's right now, I think there's 7 applications in.
There are some applications already in?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, there is on our page a list of all of us, and it has our dates
Oh, great.
and when we expire.
Sorry for my ignorance.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thanks for the clarification. I do not speak well. Thank you.
I think the September meeting, this is Ryan Johnson. I think we probably will bring an action regarding the B memo, letter, what have you. And I think there's also a Scottsdale sustainability plan that was pushed from August to September of initial discussion. Wasn't that in the email recently, Tim?
I believe so, and I'll check that to make sure.
Yeah. It's the next project for the Walton Sustainability Solutions folks, which looks great.
Very much so. And then I would say if we could just add the canal convergence again for an update.
Chair, this is Sam. Will that be just a discussion, or is there a possibility for action on that agenda item?
I think that the action would likely be coordinating volunteers as opposed to a recommendation. Does that make sense? Is that not an action?
Thank you. I'm just saying for future agenda items, we have to be very clear.
Specific.
Discussion update versus whether or not action will be included in that. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think it would be furthering to support. I'm going to go ahead and check with Canal Convergence to see if that's something that they would like us to support them with. If that is the case, the action would be to formally make that as something that we're going to do.
Excuse me, Chair, can I recommend that we include the, even though we won't act on it, the event checklist, so that we don't lose that as we move forward? Because that's one of the things that Commissioner Bossy, I'm sure, would like to follow up with. And if we keep it as an agenda item, it will stay in our minds until we can talk with the new sustainability officer.
I don't have a problem with that.
This is Sam. I guess I'm unclear as to that checklist being an agenda item.
It would be with the canal convergence. So support of canal convergence with volunteer support and or recognition as a green event in Scottsdale.
Thank you.
Ms. Bossy.
Thank you. Chair, I would like to make sure that we have something with possible action regarding the Sunset Commission and look at possibly do we want some kind of a report. I certainly don't think we were invisible at any time. We may have been resisted more, but we were never invisible. And we won't want to take anything, we don't want to take anything for granted. Also would ask that number 3 on tonight's agenda be repeated, and we have that back on, please.
That Ms. Baumgartner would come and speak again?
Not Ms. Baumgartner, but we talked about sustainability topics and ideas for how to help promote sustainability topics. We did the last time, and we still have a meeting that we need to schedule. Mr. Connor was going to help coordinate that with Kelly Corsett, and it was supposed with Commissioner Abranovich and Kuklik.
That was actually with the Waters PIO, Public Information Officer.
Well,
So that's not Kelly.
Well, the minutes say Kelly.
Okay.
So
Commissioner Bossy, did you mean agenda item 3?
from minutes, I apologize. Minutes, the minutes number 3, we referenced that, and that is a meeting that still needs to take place.
So basically, if you could add water conservation as an agenda item so that we could have an update on discussions to help support the water department in water conservation and drought.
What we can do to support them.
Yes,
In the messaging.
messaging, yes. Does anybody else have any additional items? I think that sounds like a full meeting. We haven't checked in with Mr. Abranovich. Does he have any recommendations?
No,
Okay.
I'm fine with that list.
Sorry, David, we can't see you all the time. So I just want to make certain that we can make certain that you have an
So-
opportunity to speak.
No, I'm here. Thanks. for doing
Thank
that.
you. If we have no further items, would anyone like to make a motion to?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I think we can go ahead and adjourn without a vote.
That's correct.
This meeting is now adjourned.